Hey everyone, I'm back with round 2 of my look into the Sotheby's 1991 comic books and original art auction. As I mentioned in the first video in this auction, link in description, in 1991, with the help of comics legend Jerry Weist, Sotheby's launched the first big kind of official comics auction. This auction led directly to the world we're in today with Heritage and Comic Connect and whatever, selling tens of millions of dollars worth of comics every year. In the first video, I looked at some specific lots and the trends in the hobby that they represented at the time. In this video, I'm going to look through a bunch of lots that I think are cool because there are some really cool lots in this auction and I wanted to cover them as well. But I wanted to have that focused story in the first video in this. So if you haven't checked that one out, check it out and then come back and watch this one. Or watch this one and check that one out. Doesn't matter. It's fun either way. Lot 45 presented 19 Edgar Church copies of Sparkler Comics, issues 1 to 16, 18, 19, and 23. The whole catalog is full of things like this. There are fat stacks of Church copies all over the place. In researching this catalog, I realized that dozens of these Sparkler comics from the Church collection have been CGC graded, and I didn't have them noted as such in the Edgar Church Collection Data Project, link in the description. I just updated that list yesterday. The estimate here was $9,000 to $11,000. The lot did not sell. By the way, looking through GPA, there are a lot of these sparklers just barely sell at all. This is not an uncommon one. So for number 3, there are only 3 sales listed in GPA over the entire life of GPA. So 1 sale in 2002, 1 in 2020, and the Church copy in 2017. Most of the best copies, by the way, are Church copies. Not a surprise there. Look at these grades. So you probably can't see them, but I'll read them out. 90, 96, 65, 96, 96, 94, 94, 96, 94, 96, 96, 90, 90, 96, 96, 96, 92, 60, 94, 94, and 92. That's this lot. Crazy good quality. This is why Church is just like, it's just unparalleled in the Golden Age, that run. You wouldn't even find that run in the Silver Age in all but the best pedigrees. You just really wouldn't. It's just insane. And look at them, right? Here's a random 9-4 in number 5 with a crazy green, yellow, and red color scheme. It's got beautiful preservation. Here's another 9-6, and this one's got a great Byrne Hogarth cover. This is number 14. You can see why they showed this one in the catalog because it's just like actually a dynamic cover that I'd love to collect. Lot number 47 was the cover of the catalog. Bill Everett, Marvel Comics number 2 prototype. It's a really interesting historical piece. It's not published, but is a great early timely artifact and is a very cool image. I'll show you a better image of it in a second. I have no idea what this would be worth today. It sold for $15,400. By the way, there's a Motion Picture Funnies Weekly number 1 with the covers lot, of course, in this as well, because everything was in this auction. And here's just a better image of it. It's really fun. It's really fun painting. I mean, it's obviously like a prototype, but it's, just a fun painting and like a really great image of Submariner. Lot number 49 was the Larson Marvel Comics number 1. Graded VF Plus in the catalog. It is a CGC 8.0 now. The estimate in 1991 was $40,000 to $80,000. It sold apparently for $28,600, which seems like a crazy result. It wouldn't have been weird in the 2000s to see Marvel Comics number 1 do poorly because that book was dead in the 2000s. But in 1991, it seems crazy. It felt like it was a hotter book at the time. Like I was around and it didn't feel like it was, lacking in popularity or whatever. It's a pedigree copy. It's a nice looking copy. I can't explain that result. Somebody might know the backstory and they'll tell me in the comments because that happens a lot. And I love you guys for that. I really do. I learn from this channel so much stuff. I mean, it's fun anyway. It's fun to talk about comics, but it's really fun because people say, hey, Rob, I saw your video and did you know? And I find out stuff. Sometimes I can share it with you. Sometimes I can't. But either way, I enjoy it because I love talking about comics. I love learning about comics. Anyway, as I mentioned in the first video on this auction, it seemed like the hobby, collectively, was trying to show off in this auction, putting forth the best stuff we could find, right? Basically. So this lot, the Larson Marvel Comics #1, and the next few lots, which you'll see in a second, fit right into that theme. This book sold for $89,625 in 2009, which should give you every indication of how soft Marvel Comics #1 was in the 2000s, although this was a soft result in 1991 as well. But it wasn't even worth 4 times the 1991 sales price in 2009, and sold for just $9,625 over the high estimate for this same book in 1991. That's not the case with the other Marvel Mystery Comics in this auction, and it's certainly not the case with other lots in this auction, which are selling for 10, 20, 40 times what they sold for in 1991. It was just, there was something wrong with Marvel Comics #1 in the 2000s. Thankfully, that great book, Cornerstone of the Hobby, has sorted itself out since and had some really eye-opening results. Lots 50 to 52 were Marvel Mystery Comics 2 to 4 from the Larson pedigree. This run of Larson Marvel Mystery Comics is basically the standard they were setting in this auction. Just crazy stuff from end to end. These books are great. The catalog barely shows them, but most have since surfaced, so I can show you what they look like now. The estimate on the #2 was $5,000 to $7,000. It sold for $4,950. The #3 was estimated at $2,000 to $3,000 and sold for $2,475. The #4 was estimated at $1,000 to $1,500. It also sold for $2,475, a very strong price. The #2 is gorgeous, sharp copy. It sold for $38,837.50 in 2009, nearly 8 times the 1991 price. The #3 is a sharp 8.5 with great preservation. It sold for $14,375 in July 4th, 2002. In 2002, it sold for 6 times the 1991 value. The #4 has some water damage along the spine, but is still a great-looking 5.5. It last sold for $10,021 in 2012. Lots number 53 to 55 continue the Larson run of Marvel Mystery Comics with number 5, 6, and 7. The 5 had an estimate of $4,500 to $6,000 and sold for $4,400. The #6 was estimated at $1,000 to $2,000 and sold for $1,650. The #7 was $1,000 to $2,000 and sold for $3,300. Strong result. Nick Cage, had the #5. It's a CGC 8.5 and sold for $28,680 11 years ago. It sold for $19,550 at the Cage auction in 2002. The #7, I don't have a scan on the #6. The #7 sold for $9,487.50 in 2002 as a CGC 8.5. It then sold for $12,650 in 2003, and then $14,333 in 2012 as a CGC 9.2. Still in an old holder, though. So that's a rarity, a double old holder book. You don't see that very often. Because, like, the whole, resubmit press thing wasn't as, well known. Wasn't the thing it is today where you can, send it into CGC and get books pressed. So it wasn't as obvious back then, at least. Lot number 69 is Double Action Comics #2, near mint. I just noticed, by the way, looking at this, that lot number 68 was the church copies of New York's World Fair in 1939 and 1940. This auction is crazy. The photo is terrible, so I can't match them up to be sure, but I'm assuming that this is the CGC 9.2 copy. Lot 69 sold for $6,050 in this auction against a $5,500 to $6,500 estimate. If it is the 9.2, it sold as part of a pair with Double Action Comics #1 at Comic Connect for $80,000 in 2016. Lot number 80, Wiz Comics #3, church copy. It sold for $4,400 against an estimate of $5,500 to $6,500. This must be the best copy. The best in the CGC census is the CGC 9.0. As an aside, one of the things that I've started to notice as I go through this kind of older material, all these auction lots from back in the day, and the Allentown pedigree, etc., one thing I've noticed is how difficult, at least in the CGC census, these early Wiz books are. I imagine because of how popular Wiz, Captain Marvel, etc. was in the early days of the hobby and how popular it was as a comic book in the Golden Age, I'm assuming there are copies out there locked up in collections, but the high-grade copies I can see are pretty sparse relative to the popularity of the title, in the golden age and as a collectible in the early days of the hobby. Captain Marvel was huge, so it's surprising that there aren't more nice copies represented in the census. Maybe they'll show up at some point, but it's actually something I would like to do a little bit of research on. But I say that about everything, right? Because it's like, oh, that's interesting. I'd like to look at that. I'd like to spend an afternoon just like looking at the census for Whiz Comics, and then I remember I have a job and whatever. Lot 91. Lot 91 was Bulletman 1 to 12 and 14 to 16 from the church collection. This sold right for the bottom estimate, $11,000. I told you there are stacks of church copies in this auction. And the books are insane. Here are a couple. Number 2 is CGC 9.4. I love the preservation on the red cover here. Number 3 is CGC 9.6. I think this cover is really wonderfully designed. I'd never seen it before. I think it's amazing. And the preservation is perfect. Like, when you talk about newsstand fresh, this is what you mean. This looks like it looked in 1942 or whenever this came out. 1942. I just figured that out off the top of my head. Lot 102 was the Church More Fun number 54. Lot 103 was the Church More Fun 59. The 54 hasn't been graded as far as I know. The 54 sold for $8,800 against a $9,000 to $12,000 estimate. There's a 1-inch tear at the spine, so that probably precludes it from being the best copy. It would still, cause some hearts to flutter. It's a classic cover. The 59 is a CGC 9.4. It did not sell at Sotheby's. The estimate was $5,000 to $6,000, which is actually aggressive considering the following result. It sold for just twice that estimate in 2010, selling for $11,950. It's a gorgeous book either way. I love it, but that is not a great return, at least against the estimate. These church group lots are ridiculous. They just keep coming. Lot number 113 is issues 1 to 23 and 25 to 29 from the Edgar Church National Comics run. It did not sell against an estimate of $28,000 to $33,000. Not surprisingly, there are beautiful books in this lot. The number 2 is a CGC 9.6, White Pages. I love this like kind of brawl cover. There's like a bat and a wrench. It's a lot of golden age violence for you. The number 4 is a CGC 9.6 with White Pages. Church copies, you just can't beat them. Lot number 114 sold for just over the low estimate, $12,100 against an estimate of $12,000 to $16,000. Daredevil Comics number 1 and 2 from the Church collection. The number 1 is now a CGC 9.4 with White Pages and sold for $50,400 in September of 2020. The number 2 is a CGC 9.4 and sold for just about the price of the pair in 1991. It sold for $12,000 in 2019. It's basically like you could have bought the lot in 1991, kept them both, sold this, and it's like you got the number 1 for free. It's not the way that it works, but it kind of is. Okay, in hindsight, this and the next lot are probably the two, to me, like kind of coolest, like low-key buys in the auction. Why? Well, World War II era church copies of Action Comics are very, very popular books when they come up for auction. This pair, 43 and 53, were in lot 116 and sold for $3,300, $100 over the high estimate. I don't know if either of these have been graded since. They're not in GPA, although there are 9.4 and 9.6 copies of both of these books in the census, so they could have been graded and just not sold. Lot 117 had Action Comics 63 and 66. Estimated at $2,100 to $2,700, these books have been graded since. They sold for $24.75 in this auction. The 63 sold for $38,250 in 2015. It's a CGC 9.6. I don't know what this book would be worth 10 years later. A gorgeous, gorgeous Superman World War II cover from the Church collection, CGC 9.6. Probably double. Probably like $75,000. I don't know. Like I said, it's like a low key. It was an incredible low key buy in that 1991 auction. As was this one. Number 66, again, like a really dynamic action cover, World War II, sold for $28,800 in 2021. This is all anecdotal since I haven't done a lot of research into this, and there's not really a ton of data to pull trends. But church actions just seem like they go bonkers when they come up for auction. I mean, this example, a non-church copy of this book in this grade is probably worth $12,000, something like that. This one sold for $28,000, nearly $29,000. Lot 118 is 31 comics from the Edgar Church run of Wings Comics. This lot sold for $16,500, just over the low estimate of $16,000. The number one is a CGC 9.8. It sold for $28,680 in 2018. The number 5, a CGC 9.6, sold for $3,766 in 2020. Gorgeous red cover. Here's a very cool book, Submariner number 1 from the Larson pedigree. It sold for $4,400, above the high estimate of $3,800. That same book is a CGC 9.0 and sold for $84,000 in 2019. What a stunner. I mean, it's a really nice looking book. There's a 9.6 in the census. I'd love to see that one. Lot 250 was the Carmen Infantino Murphy Anderson cover to Flash 123. The estimate was $8,000 to $10,000. It sold for $17,600, which is a more aggressive result than most of the lots we've seen in this auction, including, for example, the complete original art for Amazing Spider-Man number 31. This one is more than 2 times the low estimate. Considering what we're looking at in terms of both quality, it's a really well-executed, iconic Silver Age cover, and how important it is. This is where Earth 1, the concept of Earth 1 and Earth 2 came from. This is where Crisis started. It's one of my favorite lots in the auction and is an exceptional buy. It would be fascinating to see what this lot would go for today. It doesn't have quite the juice if it was like a Marvel cover of this quality, but it's still an incredible piece of comics history and a gorgeous piece of art. And iconic. Lot 284 was the White Mountain Amazing Spider-Man number 1, estimate of $7,000 to $9,000. It sold for $15,400. Another aggressive result, and in the context of 1991, it was part of a huge trend. White Mountain was driving big gains for Silver Age books, a trend that would intensify over the next couple of years, culminating with the White Mountain Amazing Fantasy 15 selling for nearly $40,000 in the 1993 Sotheby's auction. And that's why we've had multiple $1 million sales of Silver Age comics, because Silver Age comics became serious and important with White Mountain in the late 80s and early 90s. It's a CGC 9.6 now. I covered this book in the Amazing Spider-Man Pedigrees video as well, link in bio. So yeah, if you want to check out a little bit more about this book and its sales history. Incredible Hulk number 1 from the White Mountain pedigree, lot 290, estimate $6,000 to $8,000. It sold for $8,800. It's now a CGC 8.0. It sold at Mastro in 2005 for $17,022. Seems like a bargain. I don't have that catalog, so I've got to get that one to get a current image of the book. This book ended up on eBay in 2008, but GPA told me that it didn't actually sell. Although I covered the auction at that point, the sale didn't go through. In general, by the way, I need to get a complete set of those Mastro catalogs. There's a lot of interesting stuff in them that I just don't have access to, so I'm missing out on some stories. And we'll have more auctions to go through on video. Here's the grader's notes. Nothing much. Little chipping, pre-chipping, and spine stress lines break color. Not bad. But I love the 62 written in marker on cover notation, as that's a common artifact on White Mountain books. Here's an example from 62 from a book I talked about in the first video in this auction, the Fantastic Four number 5 CGC 9.4 White Mountain copy. You see those. I love seeing those little notations. Those are fun. Lot 322, the last lot we're going to look at. It seems like a good one to end on. Rob Liefeld, X-Force number 1, original art. 36 pages of original art and 5 painted trading card illustrations. Keep that in mind. This one still drives people crazy, and it really drove people crazy at the time. They just couldn't believe that Rob Liefeld, of all people, was being included in this kind of fancy auction. The estimate was $22,000 to $26,000. It sold for $42,900. For comparison, the Jim Lee original art to X-Men #1 sold for $44,000. $42,900 for X-Force #1 is a crazy result. And that result might surprise you, right? Since time really hasn't been kind to Liefeld. But in 1991, there was a huge amount of Rob Liefeld hype. Even now, like he gets slagged on the internet, people make fun of him, whatever. If you go to a convention and he's doing signings, there's a big line. People love this guy. And, you know, whether you love him or hate him now, he was huge in 1991, and that's indisputable. And it's not just me saying it. The owner of one of the most significant pieces of art from this book agrees with me, because that's the name of his gallery in comic art fans. So this book has been broken up. So there are pages out there. This is one of the craziest ones. This is his like kind of second physical appearance, Deadpool that is, after New Mutants 98. It's not in continuity. It's a trading card. It was bagged with trading cards. This is a painting by Liefeld of Deadpool. It's basically the second time you saw him after New Mutants 98. If you like Liefeld and you like Deadpool, you're drooling over this one. This is Grail level stuff in that world. Here's another one to end the video. Some line art. This one is classic Liefeld. Super dynamic. If you're a fan, you love this page. You may love him, you may hate him, but the guy left his mark on comics, and this page is a prime example of why. And there you have it. Ending on Liefeld seems like the best way to finish this one off, since it was such a headline at the time, and it definitely still gets people's attention. People love to talk about Liefeld. That hasn't changed. This was a lot of fun to do. I love this catalog. There's so much cool stuff to be found in here. If you've made it this far, thanks again. If you haven't yet, please like, subscribe to the channel, drop some comments about whatever floats your boat in this auction. There's a lot to comment on. Which is the best church lot? I don't know. It's crazy. I'm going to go for the Daredevil 1 and 2, but you might have a different opinion. After this, we're going to be doing a review of the Comic Connect event auction that just closed. If you watch the preview of that one, you'll know that there's lots of fun stuff in that auction, including the Allentown Batman #6, which I've talked about a lot this year. And that sold for a really good price, so that'll be fun. Yeah, thanks again. I appreciate you guys, and I'll see you in the next one.